morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Swacecast slash Velocity Kinetics. Not that we're transitioning name, it's just, I suppose this is what this video translates into these days. So I've got to do I've got to get something. Bit of Paul Rogers, bad company. Who doesn't like a shooting star? Lovely song. I've got to go to the shop for something this morning. I'm the sort of person who prefers to be in and done, and with what the weather's like today, as you can probably bloody see, it is truly awful today. So we'll go have a toddle around till the shop opens up, and then I'm going to get home, spend the rest of the day, snuggle up to George and Izzy if she is feeling reciprocal. Might play some Minecraft, might play some... no. Actually, might play some Halo, actually, because I need to... one, I want to finish that game. Two, I haven't found a video game in a while that actually grabs me and inspires me. Today's topics is a couple. Actually, one I want to sort of bosh off briefly, because I had recorded an intro for this, and much like the video... actually, I should date this, shouldn't I, as I've taken to doing it. It is the 28th of April today, and on Friday I'd recorded two intros to two videos, and there is a video about mobile phone usage coming under the how to drive video type, and then there is a video about... well, there's this actually. Those are the two intros I recorded, and I was wearing my headset at the time, connected to my phone, the microphone didn't work. Effectively what's happened is my headset's been plugged in enough for the phone to realise it's on the headset, and either the microphone element of the thing is broken, or of my headset is broken, or it was disconnected just enough so the microphone didn't work. I suspect it was disconnected just enough. That's just my opinion on it though. Whatever it was, pass. But I want to talk about some sort of YouTube videos that I've been doing the rounds at the moment. Now, there is a whole separate Swacecast, which at the time of this recording has not gone up, where I did go on a bit of a rant about YouTubey things and popular video types. I sort of want to just bring that back into focus, or circle around, shall we say. The focus I sort of want to rehash onto it, bring back to it, whatever word you would love to use to describe it as, is it's just the types of video that are getting popular again, and I've watched on the Velocity Kinetics channel, I've watched a lot of videos about how to make better content, both for myself as in what edit style and things, and you know what, I can't be arsed with it. And people might go, well, why can't you be asked? You've always said this is for shits and gigs, and if it gets popular, it gets popular. And you know what? Yeah, I still do stand by that. It's for shits and gigs. If this was ever fortunate enough to turn into something I could call a career, then fantastic. But like I say, realistically, that ain't happening. But why I started investigating is there were some channels of just crap that have gotten popular. And I don't know. I don't understand how they've gotten popular. There are some, I still stand by, there are a lot of over-sexualised videos on YouTube at the moment. How they've ended up in my YouTube, I don't actually know. But what's annoying is because I fall for it, it's like, I watch it and like, surely that's not been allowed. It then goes, oh, this person likes this content, and then I keep falling into that trap, which is bloody annoying. But there are also things like I've really grown to hate. I mean, I really didn't like it at all, but I absolutely despise and detest the reaction video category. Because there's this one that comes up on, well, my wife seems to watch quite a bit of it, or it just seems to come up on a TikTok, what have you. It seems to follow the same general formula of show the rest of the world how clueless you are, be a bit camp as you do it, hyper react to everything when actually you've offered nothing. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't mind the reaction videos when it's a professional reacting to something. So there's these couple of cooks I've seen on. Well, to be honest, I've reported them to Facebook for misleading information, because the recipes they're producing, the only way that the recipes would be good are if you're high. That's the only way those recipes would be of any good. And they're not telling you how to cook it properly at the time. They've said the ovens clearly aren't cooking. They're bringing out food that is still clearly raw. It baffles me how they've been permitted. But there was one where I think it's Ramsay reacts to it, and there's another, I can't remember the chef's name, but he's a well-respected Italian-trained chef. I believe he actually is just an Italian full stop. But as in, you know, he specialises in his home cuisine. He's not like he's an Italian who's gone off into French cuisine or anything like that. And he's slated them too. That sort of reaction where it's a professional saying, "Get on your fucking bike," that sort of thing, I don't mind, because it's putting people into their place. And do note that if you ever see any of my content anywhere with someone reacting to it, I have not given them any permission to react to duet or whatever you want to call it. It's annoying. Duet is a beautiful musical term where two people and two instruments can come together. So a fantastic example to me, as a Queen fan and becoming a fan of Bad Company at the time, hearing it was on the Queen and Paul Rodgers Return of the Champions live album, playing Can't Get Enough. Jamie Moses on the Les Paul, Brian May on the Red Special, comes a solo, beautiful duet of the two guitars, mwah, fantastico. Or a classic rock show when they're playing Bat Out of Hell by Meatloaf, Howie G and James Banks, I think his name is. They duet the guitar parts of that song. Well, obviously it's guitar parts, otherwise they wouldn't be duetting it. But that's you know, beautiful. Not just some random person on their phone reacting to some bullshit as they go. That winds me up no end. The road's clear. We'll past the cathedral today, I think. So yeah, just gotta get that off my chest. But something I want to talk about today as well. Now, I've been a petrol head. I've loved cars for as long as I can remember. When I first started primary school, way back in Quainton primary school, what was that? Been 1994. So, if in the rare chance anyone watches this who was there back then, hello, fellow former classmate. Abbey Gardens, lovely. Well, not in this weather. When the sun's out, absolute bloody lush. Or at least in my opinion it is. But when I started school at Quainton, I was one group of the boys who always brought in toy cars, because that's what we played with at break time. I remember when I started St Osyth Primary, I had to do a show and tell thing very early on. I remember that. I couldn't tell you how early into that class my time there that was. I know it was very early. And Weetabix used to do these little car cards, sort of facts about cars at the time, like the Ferrari Testarossa and things like that. And I think I had a couple of those in my rucksack still, and maybe even a toy car from still going to Quainton that I had, and I showed and told. So I've loved my cars for as long as I can remember. My late uncle, mechanic, agriculture machinery is what he worked on, because he was trained at class at the Man's factory in Bury St Edmunds. My uncle, which is my uncle by marriage, so say the first uncle I've mentioned is blood uncle, but uncle by marriage, he tinkers with all sorts of things. He's restored a couple of motorbikes he showed me, a BSA, a Norton, an Enfield. Amazing stuff. Where should I go from here? Go that way. Yep, thank you for giving way to me. Sorry, some people around here just can't do roundabouts or mini roundabouts in any capacity. That's bumpy, that's driving along an old patch in the road. But, you know, I've always, like I say, always loved my cars. My parents always sort of indulged it, probably the best way to put it. They'd have Volvo magazines around, as in both, that's what Volvo sent you if you owned one. And, well, whenever my dad got one, that was back on old enough so you get a brochure, and I used to read the brochures cover to cover, memorise everything, put together my dream spec, and then that wouldn't be my dream spec, and then I'd do something else, and then that would be my dream spec, and so on and so on. But a friend of mine from my days at St Osyth Primary School pinged me last night, actually. She's my oldest friend, and I'm amazed after all these years we still keep in contact. Not as in I'm bloody amazed, as in there was a period where I'd lost her address, I'd lost all her details. So, you know, I found what I think I'd written her number down on I can't remember how I found her phone number again, and I called on a payphone once from middle of Thetford just to confirm. My parents wouldn't let me phone out the blue, and you know what, I'm really really thankful I actually took that plunge, because we've stayed in contact ever since. And she sent me a link to a video that she'd watched with her documentary with her dad. Her dad, it's from the early 90s, about 1993 if I remember rightly, and I'll try and remember to link it below, called A to B, and it's talking about, it's business salesmen, business reps talking about their cars and the status symbol they have. And it's one of these things that's made me think, actually, you know what, even now cars still have an enormous status symbol. People will draw an opinion about you from your car, not just how you drive it, just from what it is. So for instance, that Q3 that's just gone by, I'd be inclined to think there's some sort of, potentially if it's a woman, I might think, actually I won't say what I'm thinking out loud, because if I want to, shall we say the thoughts are probably on the sexist end of the spectrum, and let's just leave it there. If it was a man, I'd think he's probably a colossal wanker in some way, more money than sense. And likewise with the Q2, more money than sense, regardless of your gender, regardless of what you're sporting in the trousers department, I'd think you've got more money than sense. That's just my view. And my old landlord, before Sarah and I moved to Great Well Neatham, when we still lived in Church Cottages in Risby, I'd obviously replaced the Baleno for Patrick Swacey. I've come. Okay. So I've just been following random roads. I hadn't intended to come this way. Well, not fully. I did still intend to drive by and see if that A4 was still there, because it was there the other week when I recorded a video, and the camera, the one where I finished off the video in my armchair, because the camera died, and it was still there about 2-3 weeks ago from when I recorded that. Sometimes people will judge you based on whether you've got a private plate on. They'll think you've got something to hide, some money to burn, what have you. Sometimes people will judge you based on how new your plate is. I'm not entirely bothered myself. You do, it's sort of a case of it's still there. Maybe that suspension modification is a bit problematic that they've done to it then, or it rides like a brick. I tell you, if Sarah passed a test tomorrow though, if I could leverage the loan for it, I'd happily have it. But yeah, it was a documentary about salesmen and how people view cars. Oh yeah, I was talking about my landlord, wasn't I? So he sort of viewed me as modest and things like that when I had the Baleno. Now, even though more than once he tried to get me in with the speed gun because he was one of the neighbourhood speed watch. Now I don't speed, not deliberately, should I say? As in, if I've misread the speed limit, not noticed the change in speed sign, yeah, you know what, I will have sped. And by what I set my speedo to in this car, when I'm on the motorway, as in my speed restrictor, I think it's 71, 72, the car seems to settle into a better, I would say a better gear, but because it's a CVT, it doesn't really have a gear. It seems to settle on it seems a lot more happier on the gear ratio it picks. It doesn't seem to keep changing its mind like it sometimes seems to at 70. So at one occasion, I knew he was going to get me. I came to a stop on the way out of the village where he was. Stopped right at the national speed limit sign. Disengaged my traction control and left a rather nice set of number 11s behind. And he was not happy with me for doing that. But at the same time, it's like, look, if it was sort of like a cheeky little game, like sort of thing, like, you know what? That's fine, but it didn't feel like a cheeky little game. It felt like a full-on, proper, I'm gonna fucking have him sort of thing. And then when I brought this car, he gave me funny looks when I brought a test Swace home. Because of where we lived, Sarah and I brought the Swace back to see whether it would even fit between the gate posts where I had to back the car up in this car. To be honest, I think the A4 would scrape. My landlord at the time had a is it an E-Class Mercedes? No, it's a C. I think it's a C-Class estate, if I remember rightly. And he says he used to reverse up there all the time. But obviously, when you've done it a lot and no muscle memory, or you've got, I would call it peripheral memory. So as in you know what you're looking for out the corner of your eye. I guess some people say that is a form of muscle memory. You know, I wasn't too happy doing that. But when I brought this car home, he gave me such a funny look, and not long afterwards, he talked about putting the rent up. Surprise, a fucking prize. And he gave me such looks when I drove up and down the driveway in this. And it's a case of like, look, if my Baleno wasn't playing silly buggers with the air conditioning condenser, if the air conditioning system was working perfecto, then yeah, you know what, I probably would have kept it. It probably would still be the car I'm doing stuff in now. Probably would be the car that I'm facing the prospect of going up to. Actually, I choose my words carefully because it sounds like I don't want to go, which is far from it, because I'm being best man at my best friend's wedding next week. But I've got to go up to Cumbria, which is a very long drive. I'm not going to lie, when I drove all that way in the Baleno to Scotland from down here, my back and spine were, well, it's the same thing. My back and my shoulders were killing me by the time I got there. And no, this isn't me just okay, so we get to A14 here. That is interesting. In the words of Jack Sparrow. Sorry, mate. Couldn't help myself flipping a coin on his. Rolling the coin across his skeleton fingers. But he gave me such. But yeah, the base of the long and short of it, the Baleno had to go. I wasn't too happy at it going, in the sense of I actually really liked that Baleno. I'd been through a lot with that car, although knowing that it's failed 2 MOTs since it left me, might have meant that at the rate of miles I was still doing, which when I traded it had 20 on, and I've done nearly 31,000 now. So but that car would then be about 50,000, 60,000 mile car now, and God knows what would be going wrong with it. And not as in to make it sound like I've got no patience for getting the car fixed, having them repaired, seeing to them, because I've got all the patience in the world, and I would happily have kept taking it back to John Banks to get it seen too. He probably wouldn't have failed an MOT at that point, I guess. But the looks, like I said, the looks my landlord gave me, especially when this used to trip itself over into electric mode. Now, if the car was a complete electric only, I kind of would understand his viewpoint, because I think the same when I see a lot of things like the Teslas come by. Sometimes I think about the size of their wallet, how lucky they may be when they're being driven like when they're being abused for their 0 RPM torque. I think the person's an absolute tosspot. I mean, that said though, I know BMWs were the worst driven cars on the road for a long time, as were Audis, but I believe the consensus is that shifted over to Tesla drivers. Not that forgives anyone else for driving like a bit of a wazzock, shall we say. But he's a man, that my old landlord is an engineer, so he's a man of detail. So if he'd paid attention to the detail, he would have seen that this is basically a Toyota Corolla. He would have noticed, I could have even understood, if I'd bought the Levorg, if I'd been to Subaru, I could have understood his attitude if it was a Subaru badge on the bonnet. It's a Suzuki. It's cheap. Well, this isn't, but for the most part, Suzuki is cheap, utilitarian Japanese cars that just get the job done. Is probably the best way to describe it. And then what made it worse is that Merc going to try and pull out. What made it worse is then when I had the incident with the front end of this car and damaged it on the fence of the house. The look of pleasure on my landlord's face really got me. And do you know what? If I had a private plate on who didn't know how old my car is, I'd be willing to bet he wouldn't have batted an eyelid too much. But it's the perception of it. What really bugged me was how he seemed to think. It was the way, like I say, it was just the way how he was so visibly titillated, so happy that I damaged this. But I suppose you could easily argue with the fact that whenever he asked for a rental increase, I thought, well, why are you doing running a Mercedes then, mate? You're asking for a rental increase, what are you doing driving a Mercedes? I suppose you could argue the toss on that one quite easily. Whether you could argue it rightly is another question altogether. It was interesting in that documentary, that A to B documentary, they were talking about the badge, and I don't just mean what badge it's got on the front necessarily, because obviously there were people making fun of the Austrian Maestro. Whilst I do tend to agree that my granddad's very last car, my late granddad's last car before he gave up driving, was an Austin Maestro, so I kind of need to watch my words a little bit, and likewise a little bit over the Austin Maxi, because he had a Maxi for years. But there was all this whole focus on the car, and he had this I badge on, and so people in the know would know that you've got the I on it, like the 2.0 GLTI and GLTE, and whether you've got an SRA, a GSE, a GSX, and things like that. It's all these different abbreviations for not having to keep going on. That is that I really don't like making late and last minute decisions on the exit like that, but just, there's a lot of dips and pots and ruts in the road, and I feel like the steering wheel's jiggling around too much for my liking in this rain. I know next Sunday I've got to just do it regardless, because I'm sure it's going to take me, I'm sure the sat-nav's going to take me up the, pretty sure the sat-nav's going to take me up to somewhere up on the A1 to move over to the A66 if I remember rightly. But yeah, but there's this whole fascination about what the badge was, and got me thinking about all these German cars that are out there. So you see all these Mercedes and BMW seem to be the worst offenders. Now, whether this is people doing it aftermarket or whether it's something you can actually specify at BMW itself, that is another question altogether. Where you'll see Mercs that sporting AMG badges, but then people in the know who like their cars will look at it and go, well, that's too low, that's too high, the wheels are wrong, that's wrong, where's the gills, that's not, and then a few seconds later, that's not an AMG. And the same with the M badged BMW cars, it's like, that's not, it's too low, it's too high, it's not got this, it's not got that, where's the gills? And then you hear it start up in the system, clack, 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 it's like, you cheeky bugger, it's just got an M Sport badge on. But people like to do that, I guess, because it's a flex that you're able to afford to buy the AMG. I suppose you could argue it's a bit like I remember years ago, well, I think I talked about it in the Car Chase Heroes video, where I drove a Porsche Cayman. And for years on Top Gear, they'd all said, you drive a Boxster because your life didn't work out well enough to buy a 911. Although I'm not sure why, because I always thought the Porsche Boxster was kind of a good-looking car, but perhaps I'm just weird. Perhaps I'm just proper weird, in the words of Geordieisms. The words that are not finding a way of doing the making of the sentence and the thinking of the talk. And then the Cayman, when the Cayman was introduced, people were like, well, you buy a Porsche Boxster because your life didn't work out well enough to buy a Cayman, and you're driving a Cayman because your life didn't work out well enough to buy the 911. That was what the joke was. And whether it was right or wrong, I don't know, but I did find it funny. I suppose you could argue, like say with those badges on those Porsches, it's just never mind the fact that all Porsche engineered. So to me, it doesn't really matter what it is, because you can argue now with the Macan. It's like you drive the Porsche Macan, didn't things go quite well enough for you to have a KN, and so on and so forth. Midnight Club Dub Edition got me interested into those Lexuses. The Lexuses. The funny thing is, watching that documentary, I said to Phoebe in Instagram message after I watched it, or not that long after I watched it. So watching all those cars, it was a documentary from '93. And so it's got me right in the childhood, because it's all these cars I recognise and I saw on the road at the time, and sort of I recognise that. I guess I sort of start to feel what my parents feel when they watch programmes from sort of the 50s, 60s, 70s, the era they were growing up in, or when things go back to, when things are sort of set in that time. You sort of see all these different things, all like my dad's example would be when he watches some of the later episodes of The Likely Lads. He still lived in Sunderland and things at the time, and he knew and saw what they were doing. And he could take you back there now and show you exactly what it is now when they've flattened all those city streets and put them in the high rises. It got me right, like I say, it got me right in the childhood, and all this talk of badges and things. It's like, but all that talk about things like the Ford Sierra, the Fiesta XR2, and the Escort pitched against the Astra, the Cavalier. It wasn't the Vectra. What was the other thing? Was it Amiga, Carlton, something like that at the time. You got such middle management cars, I suppose you could talk about. And then if you were really good, you had the BMWs and the Mercs, and if you were top dog, you had the Jag. That's all been replaced now, or if you wanted an underdog, you'd go with the Nissan Primera, or I think one of the guys now had a Mazda 626, if I remember rightly. Certainly it was a Mazda he had. No mention of anything Volvo though, which sort of for how I was as a child, no Volvo, like, oh man. And yeah, that all sort of got replaced with the BMW, Audi, and Merc. That became your middle management car. Maybe a Saab as an outlier. Although I guess now with the advent of email, we don't need as many sales rep cars on the road anymore. It was a very interesting watch, and yeah, it just got me thinking. Really, I mean, at that time when that was set, my dad was driving Volvos, and it actually, in many ways, with him being a vicar, he's even mentioned he sort of had his own dilemma as to what to get. And people go, well, what do you mean he's a vicar? It's like, depending on if you're unfortunate enough to have a parish that really gets too involved in your life, they'll have an opinion about anything and everything you do, you drive, you speak, you say, you dress, you decorate, you name it, they'll have an opinion on it. The brilliant thing about the Volvos were it was obvious that they weren't cheap. So it wasn't like that anyone could accuse my dad of cheaping out. But, and also because they both had private plates on, no one actually knew whether they were the newest and the latest models that we had. Unless, of course, I think one of his parishioners was. I didn't see that standing water. One of his parishioners was a Volvo salesman, so he knew exactly what my dad was doing. Oh, you brave cyclist. Very, very brave. The Volvos were nice and anonymous. Especially things like the 440s, S40s were very anonymous, and still personal favourites of mine. The V70s were when he stopped working. He'd had to stop working by the time he was on V70s, but perhaps V70s might have been too much of a flex for the parish. I don't know. But at the same time, though, it's not like he's buying the Rs or the T4s or the R designs, whatever they would have been at the right time. Because of how many cars he's had, I couldn't quite tell you exactly how they would classify. I think there was I can't think who he nearly thought of going with at one point. I think he might have had a wind. I feel like he said it was a BMW, but I don't know. Certainly it was something that would have been as big of a flex. And ultimately he didn't. He decided against it because it's like just getting off there. He's going up there. Okay. Ultimately because the parish somehow they caught wind of him looking at this car, and they were just started to give him funny looks and things for it. So it's amazing, even now, even when we're in a society that... I'm not going to speak my opinion on this whole multi-gender thing, whether you're whatever gender you identify as, but we're let me put it this way, we're a society that is quite accepting these days of most labels people apply to themselves, whether you're talking about their gender, or at least we're getting there with that, sort of recognising people's feelings on the matter, no matter how confusing it may be for everyone else to keep up. But we are getting better at recognising that's what people see, feel, want to be. We're getting more tolerant as to people's sexual orientation, and how people wish to come out as, shall we say? Whether, and by I mean come out as, whether you mean you want to come out as bi, pan, asexual, demi, hemi actually a thing? I know demi's a thing, I can't remember if hemi's something. I can't remember, I'd have to ask my brother to go fully into all of that. But bizarrely, and even you can even get good knockoffs of things that nearly look the part. So you can get Rolexes that look, or things that pretend to be Rolexes that look nearly the part. You can get decent wallets and wallets and ties that look like they could be Yves Saint Laurent, or they could be Hugo Boss, but they're actually not. They're not. Or you can, so many places are selling off things at reasonable prices. You can get the badge, and not pay the price. So yeah, it's bizarre in many ways that we still put as much stock. Sorry, there's two Belenos just chilling side by side. One AX, one AY. Same plate. Oh, one plate's got blackened wheels. So that person, that Land Rover there, it's a Freelander 2. It's one of these things, let's put it into practice just before we shut the camera off as to what we think. So that Freelander 2, at the time, if it was bought brand new, I'd have thought potentially, very moneyed, very well off. Do you actually need it? That VW Touran, I probably wouldn't have thought too much of it. The Focus there, wouldn't have thought too much of it, because the Focus is a good car. Likewise with that Octavia and Skoda Octavia, it's a good car. That Vauxhall Adam, I'd have thought you got more money than sense. The Citroen van coming, I would have thought they'd driven a hell of a lot better than Transits, and usually looked after a hell of a lot better. What's that one coming behind? Ooh. But parked just as badly. Ooh. Fucking mental. Ford Fiesta that's just pulled in over there. Good choice. There's a Mercedes CLA. Probably would have thought you got a little bit more money than sense. The no, it's not Vauxhall. The Seat Leon. Not really got much of an opinion on it, but I would have thought fair. But personally, also would think quite sensible. Not too bothered about the frugality of it. Got a bit of nous about them to go a little bit different. Mazda CX-5 going that way. Bit of nous to do things a bit differently. What else have we got? The Belenos, I would have said, good choice, you've done your research. I still stand by that. Nissan Duke, over there, got more money than sense. We've got over there an Astra. Never really been much of an Astra fan, but that said, really, there isn't an awful lot wrong with a Vauxhall Astra, if we're going to be honest. Don't need to keep that car on anymore because I'm getting out in a second. We've got there a Mini Countryman. Not sold on them. They're just, in my opinion, a giant waste of time. Jaguar XJ, fantastic car. I would think you're very well moneyed and you've got a lot of disposable income. But you see what I mean? How you can have all these opinions about it, and it shows the weight of the badge. Because actually, if let's flip it around, if that Jag wasn't a Jag and it was a Mercedes, I'd be saying the same thing, saying you're over-moneyed, you got more money than sense, and so on and so forth. And I'd always be, because I quite like a Jag anyway, I'd be leaning a little bit more in favour of a Jag. To be honest, if I had a BMW, or if my parents had ever had a Mini when I was growing up, then I'd probably be thinking quite favourably towards the Mini. This Vauxhall Insignia, is it? Or is it another Astra Estate? Doing things a bit differently, but could have parked a little bit better next to me and not felt the need to come through the space in the manner that he did. But there we are. So that's an end of this Swacecast. I think the camera is still running, which makes a change in all the other ones. I think I've done one or two where the camera kept running the entire time. But yeah, interesting talk about badges, YouTube, and landlords. I didn't really finish my story about my landlord, did I? So I bought this car. He gave me all sorts of foul scowls and things when I drove it up the driveway, and a couple of times it passed him when it was pre-ding. Then when it had been dinged, he was clearly so happy that the damage had been done. Then when I got it fixed, he was not a happy bunny either. He went back to scowling at me because I obviously had the money to get it repaired, all the money for the insurance. Although either way, he shouldn't be fucking assuming anything. And he always treated me very differently after I bought this. But a bit of me is also thinking, how would he have treated me if I bought the BMW I saw at the time and very seriously considered? How would he have treated me if I came back with a Subaru with its boxer engine? And some of the Levorgs I've heard do make that whole noise like a boxer engine does. Unless that had an exhaust blow, and that's not actually how they sound at all. It makes you wonder, though. The weight of the badge, it means everything. Actually, even I remember when I bought my first Swift, the salesman who sold me it, he was telling me he'd worked for Volkswagen back in the days, he's also worked for Alfa and Fiat as well, and I was telling him that the way VW acted, and he said it's a matter of badge. I'm like, well, what do you mean? And he said they're acting like that because it's a VW. You've gone in to buy a VW, they're treating you like you've got a lot of money, even though the fact you're buying it on finance means you've got what you've got to spend per month, but you can't really commit to anything more than that. He said when he worked at the Fiat, well, back then in Stockton, by Thornaby, actually, was it classed as Stockton, was it classed as Thornaby? Either way, it was the Alfa Romeo and Fiat dealership at the time. He worked in that, and he'd seen customers get declined for finance on Alfas. They'd walk across the floor and get a Fiat, which is virtually the same car, and it would pass on the finance. All because of the badge. So I suppose that really does bring it down. The fact that even though that documentary that Phoebe sent me was set in 1993, badge is still a thing. It still carries an awful lot of weight. Anyway, I've got a couple of bits of shopping to do at the Tesco, and then I'm going to go home, get some pets off Georgie, or give some pets to Georgie, get some pets, because he does the biscuits a lot. Find a way to kill the rest of my very wet day. So drive safe, look after yourselves. If you're liking the content, feel free to donate via paypal.me/velocitykinetics, or go to buymeacoffee.com/customer service expert and buy me a coffee. Do I have to get out now? Oh, it's all wet!